The intensification of the fighting is first and foremost to bring Hamas back to the negotiating table, but negotiations with Hamas are not a war aim. The result of those negotiations, the return of the hostages, is a war aim, and that's why we're seeing the offense ratcheting up again. Chief Commander or Chief of Staff of the Israel Defense Forces is Lieutenant General Eyal Zamir, who comes from the Armored Corps. That's where he grew up within the ranks of the Israel Defense Forces. And he brings with him a completely new doctrine to the war fighting inside the Gaza Strip. And it's with a view to achieving two goals. The first is to drive Hamas back to the negotiating table, those negotiations having stalled of late, with a view to bringing home all of the hostages that were seized on October 7th, 2023 by Hamas. There are still 59 hostages inside the Gaza Strip, out of which it is estimated 24 are still alive. In addition to that, there is a second aim of the war, and that second aim of the war is to prevent ever again Hamas being able to constitute a threat toward Israel from within the Gaza Strip. And so both of those war aims require more intensive fighting. What you're seeing as a consequence of that is the steady widening of the perimeter that encompasses the northern Gaza Strip, the eastern border of the Gaza Strip, which abuts the western border with the states of Israel, and of course the southern border of the Gaza Strip. Now, initially, this buffer, this perimeter, was 1 kilometer deep into Gazan territory throughout the north, east, and south of the Strip. Israel is steadily widening that because it is conveying to Hamas that the longer it holds on to these hostages, the more of a liability that Hamas policy will prove to be, the more of a liability the retention of the hostages will show itself to be. And the taking of hostages will be converted in the mindset not only of Hamas, but of the Gazan people, from being a policy that yields a reward to a policy that yields destruction and the taking and holding, potentially permanently, of land within the Gaza Strip. And what that's doing is it's steadily turning the Gazan population against the policies that Hamas have made, the culmination of which was the appalling massacre on October the 7th. In the fighting is the vaunted Golani Brigade. Now, the Golani Brigade is one of the most celebrated units of the Israel Defense Forces. It has the respect of every member of the IDF. If there was one criticism that one might be able to level against the Golani Brigade, it may be that they are sometimes too brave a group of war fighters, but they are extremely capable. The Golani Brigade was established during the War of Independence. It was focused primarily on warfighting in northern Israel, but over time it proved itself to be such a capable force that it's regularly deployed to wherever the hottest arenas may be. So as an example, in Operation Defensive Shield in 2002, the Israel Defense Forces launched a massive urban warfare defensive campaign inside Judea and Samaria, the West Bank, against Palestinian homicide bombings that were murdering Israeli Jews and non-Jews within the state of Israel as a result of the detonation of buses, restaurants, eateries, even Passover ceremonies. The brigade that was most deeply engaged in the fighting in the city of Jenin, which is in the West Bank, in Judea and Samaria, was the Golani Brigade, led by the colonel at the time, Moshe Chico Tamir, who ultimately retired from the Israel Defense Forces at the rank of Brigadier General. It was the Golani Brigade that gave Prime Minister at the time, Ariel Sharon, the confidence that we could take the fight to counter the terror emanating from the West Bank to these Palestinian Arab cities. It was the Golani Brigade that proved itself, and it has now been taken to operate with great success inside the Gaza Strip. Three other points that are worth noting with regards to the Golani Brigade is that it has produced three chiefs of staff of the Israel Defense Forces, those being Motagor, Lieutenant General Gabi Ashkenazi, and Lieutenant General Gadi Eisenkot. So people have emanated from the Golani Brigade to the highest ranks of leadership in the Israel Defense Forces. In addition to that, the Israel Defense Forces, for years, was acting in a reactive manner to terror emanating from southern Lebanon against the state of Israel. In the terrain of southern Lebanon and the terrain of northern Israel, the Israeli defense establishment saw fit to establish a crack unit of counter-terror operatives that were birthed from the Golani Brigade. That unit is called the Agoz unit, is one of the most capable fighting forces inside the Israel Defense Forces today, and it is part of what is known as the 98th Division, which is a commando division. That division led much of the fighting inside Gaza in the wake of the October 7th massacre. So the Golani Brigade is on the ground. Nobody should be surprised that it's on the ground. It will be effective in its fighting duties there. And ultimately, Lieutenant General Eyal Zamir has said that he wants to see the Rafah Brigade of Hamas defeated completely. I believe that the Golani Brigade will be a part of that defeat, and I believe that the defeat of the brigade inside Rafah will be achieved. There was an operation inside Judea and Samaria, or the West Bank, against the leaders of an organization called the Lion's Den. And the Lion's Den took its name from Ibrahim al-Nablusi. And Ibrahim al-Nablusi was known as the Lion of Nablus, hence the name of this terror organization. It's a hybrid, incidentally, between Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad, and it recruits from among the young male population of Judea, Samaria, and the West Bank. It's incidentally the existence and the ready ability of this terror organization to recruit from among young men inside the West Bank puts the lie to the claim that the Gazan population of the Gaza Strip are only sympathetic towards Hamas because they live beneath the jackboot of Hamas, and therefore they have no choice other than to show their loyalty and their fealty to that terror organization. Well, the young population in areas such as Jenin and Nablus, in other words, cities inside the West Bank, they do not live beneath the jackboot of Hamas. They do not live beneath the terror organization that is Hamas. The West Bank is led by the Palestinian Authority, and yet we see young men readily lining up in order to take part in terror activities such as those that are perpetrated by this terror organization, the Lion's Den. Now, with all of that having been said, what you saw in the footage that was released was an exceptionally efficient, very, very precise, pinpoint counter-terror operation, the execution of which took all of 2.5 minutes when the order was given for two forces to move forward. One was Special Forces of the Israel Defense Forces, and the other was a special branch of the Israeli National Police that is known in Hebrew as the Yamam. And the Yamam organization can roughly be equated with a SWAT unit in the American police forces. They are among the very best counter-terror operatives that Israel has. Even though they are not part of the military, they are part of the Israeli National Police, and they regularly partner up with elements of the Israel Defense Forces because of their proficiency, because of their expertise. It was the same Yamam unit, incidentally, that rescued Noah al-Gamani during Operation Al-Non, the operation that rescued Noah al-Gamani and also Al-Mog Me'el-Jan and two other hostages who were being held inside the Gaza Strip. So you've seen an elite level counter-terror operation that engaged only with the targets of that operation, results in the successful arrest and detainment of a terror leader. And while the operation took 2.5 minutes approximately from start to finish, of course, the intelligence gathering that takes place prior to that is painstaking and takes a great deal of time to gather together. And in addition to the forces that actually carried out this operation, brigades from the Israel Defense Forces arrayed throughout Judea and Samaria and the West Bank will have sealed off the perimeter surrounding the area in which this operation took place. And they will have been stationed in those areas for many, many hours prior to this operation taking place. So a great success, but I can tell you it is one of many, many counter-terror raids and operations that are taking place inside the West Bank on a daily and nightly basis in order to counter the terror that emanates from that enclave. So the policy of house demolitions against terrorists and those who have carried out acts of terror against innocent Israelis is very controversial within the State of Israel itself. It's not a policy that the IDF or the Israeli government or even the courts and the judiciary of Israel are enthusiastic about deploying. It's actually come about for a number of reasons. One of the primary motivations and explanations for Israel's policy of very occasionally demolishing the homes of terrorists who launch terror attacks against innocents is that as far back as 2017, 2018, the Palestinian Authority had a dedicated fund to award and reward the families of terrorists who had carried out terror attacks that resulted in the death of Israelis, innocent Israelis. That fund had more than $300 million in assets. Now, when a terrorist makes the decision that they are going to go out and murder an innocent Israeli, one of the best ways of disincentivizing them from doing so is to let it be known and to demonstrate that the punishment for such a crime will be levied against the family of that terrorist, and it will come in the form of confiscating or demolishing possessions that are of greater worth than the reward the terrorist family will receive from the Palestinian Authority. One of the assets that are of greatest worth to the family of terrorists is their home. And so when the Israel Defense Forces demolishes the homes of terrorists and of the families of terrorists, it's sending a very clear signal. Number one, if you do this, if you launch terror attacks against innocent Israelis, your family will pay a price, and that price will be greater than any award or reward that they would receive from the Palestinian Authority's fund.